And it's actually harmful. And if you want to solve and help, a number one thing to help poverty is to prevent unwanted pregnancies. So it goes into educating.
Or abortions, for that matter. I mean, it's hard to have an abortion if you're not pregnant, right?
Yeah, and the University of Cincinnati did an amazing study over years, about 7 years ago, of like all the Northern Kentucky schools, middle school and high school, and they came to these same conclusions. They had a nice control group of schools that weren't teaching anything and schools that were teaching abstinence only. They obviously found that the ones that teach abstinence only were worse. It did nothing. If not, they were worse. But the disturbing part is the schools that weren't teaching anything, since that study came out, there were several schools now teaching abstinence only after we had this study about their school. And to answer your one question, I don't think the districts are being deceptive or trying to keep, when they ask, like, what's being taught in schools, because I've met with several of the districts. The reason they're not telling you what's being taught in schools is because they don't know. They honestly don't know.
How do you not? Now, think about that. You don't know what you're teaching in your own classrooms. That's frightening.
Yes. When I went to one of the schools in particular, and I was reading from the book of what was being taught in their school, they asked me for a copy of it.
Wow.
And my response was, well, there's your problem. If you're asking a parent for a copy of your own sex ed book, this tells you have a huge problem in your classroom.
Now, let me back up, Jim Helton from Tri-State Frank Thinkers, because this is rather interesting. Is it the blissful ignorance aspect of these educators? Because clearly it's public information, should be public information. To get a little more from 19 couldn't get it, but each, from what I understand, each classroom may have been different within the same district, and it's one of those things where, much like parents, it's like, hey, you know what? I know what's going on, but I'm going to put my fingers in my ears and go la 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 because I don't want to know.
It's passing the buck. So when you went to the school was like, well, I was able to get it thrown out of my son's school, the abstinence only. Yeah. But then my response was, great, but let's get comprehensive sex in. And they waffled and buckled because they didn't want the phone calls. Well, then they push it to the district, and the district pushes to the state. Like, nobody wants to take a proactive stand to say abstinence only not only doesn't work, it's not harmful. Comprehensive sex ed is good, and I'm willing to take phone calls from parents about it because I have the facts and evidence. That is the issue. Nobody wants those calls from parents who are going to be upset that their kids learn about sex. And even when I answered questions from school boards on this subject, they're like, well, I don't want my kids to learn how to use a condom because then they're more likely to have sex. Not true. Or they'll have multiple partners. All the things they said to me about what they believed, it was a belief system. It wasn't true. They're not more likely to have sex. They're not going to have sex any sooner. They're not going to have any more partners. The only thing they're going to be is safer and more educated.
Well, here's how, in a perfect world, that would work, Jim. Is it like, okay, sex education is going to be a thing. Have that conversation. You have to have that conversation with your kids. You're going to be taught it in schools. I would say this. Your own life, show them and teach them the values that you want imparted on your children by living your life and the values in which you're teaching your children. And that is monogamy and safe sex and, that whole thing. And then you talk, hey, listen, you know what? I would really prefer it if you waited until marriage to have sex. But I want I want all the information available to my kid. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, well, this is condoms, IUDs. Here's the whole thing. But above all else, I want to imprint in their mind is what we taught them in the household. And then ultimately, they're going to have to make their own decision because they're a young adult and they're going to be alone at some point with someone of the opposite sex. And I want them to have all the facts and all the information, not just the tired old don't do it, because that's not helpful. That's my opinion. I think most parents probably feel that way.
And it's not just the opposite sex. It could even be the same sex. But here's the stat most people want to ignore. Like, well, middle school's too young. They shouldn't be learning about these things. By the time they hit 8th grade or they get out of 8th grade, almost a third of them are going to have had sex. It's 25 to 33%. By the time they graduate high school, the majority of them are going to have had sex. So whether parents like it or not is irrelevant. The kids are kids, and this is what they're doing. And like I said, if we're teaching our kids abstinence only until marriage, it has a 2% success rate.
Right.
Only 2% of the entire population do this, so it doesn't work.
Well, you have peer pressure, you have other factors, you have social media, you have all those elements that quite honestly move in that direction. You have sexual curiosity and just that natural attraction to someone to be close to. And so what scares me about this whole thing, Jim, too, is that while the number of teens having sex for the first time has been going down since the 90s, at the same time, only about 40% of them use a condom. And by the way, the new HIV infection rate among teens has, in that same period, gone up 21%. So, when you got less than half using condoms and protection, and we have a 21% increase in infection rates in HIV, that's some pretty serious stuff right there.
And it goes to the states and federal government. So the state of Kentucky spends $17 million a year on abstinence-only sex education. The federal government just a couple months ago increased funding for abstinence-only by $25 million. They spend $75 million a year towards this program. So,
and in the states, do the states match that as well? How's that work?
They usually get grants or funding. So if they spend X amount of dollars, they'll get X amount of dollars in return towards the program. So in the law in Kentucky is written so poorly. So, for example, in Kentucky it says that they must teach abstinence sex education. So most people take that as abstinence only. Well, that's not the law. If you teach comprehensive sex ed includes abstinence, but that's not what the law says. In Ohio, the law says you must teach sex education, but there's no law on what that is, or no guideline.
Wow, how confusing! I mean, people must think, and I guess the people in power positions there must think that kids are stupid, and that's the most insulting thing to me, Jim, is that we don't appreciate the kids are well-informed and smart because they have access to all this stuff. And to somehow say, hey, it's the old days, just do as I say, not as I do, is just, to me, that is an egregious sin. It's not taking into account that kids are going to find this information out.
Yeah, and I think it goes through the school system, too. A lot of parents and a lot of schools want to teach the kids what to think. And I think if we teach critical thinking skills and teach them how to think, that's why when they get in these tough situations, they'll be able to work it through. I never tell my kid usually what's right or wrong. I just tell them what the consequences for their actions are so that they can make an educated decision. And I fully trust my kids to make good decisions based on that. And they have. They've proven that time and time again by using critical thinking instead of just telling them black and white what's right or wrong.
Is this a byproduct of the helicopter parenting generation, smothering the kids? And, I don't know if does mom show up and show you how to use the condom when you have sex for the first time? How's that work?
Yeah, so, for me, I know a lot of people felt uncomfortable. For me to talk about sex with my kids was no big deal at all. We're very open. We talk to our kids about lots of things, and we told them that this is natural. This is how it works. Mm-hmm. When you're ready, here's the things you need to be aware. And it was not an uncomfortable conversation at all. Because, sex is a good thing. It is fun. It's not a bad thing. We want them to be ready. Like I said, they're in middle school. I
guarantee you, Jim, somebody was uncomfortable. It may not have been you, but somebody was uncomfortable.
My wife.
Yeah, there's always somebody. It's like my dad's talking to me about sex right now. This is weird. This is weird.
Like I said, it wasn't because we are open with our children about lots of things. And we have good communication. It wasn't as comfortable it was when I was growing up. Now, when my dad read the book to me and sex ed, I was uncomfortable as all could be.
Right.
It wigged me out. But and I think to my mom to this day, we haven't even had this conversation yet. So, but that's the way I grew up at that time. Mm-hmm. And I try to make the point with my children too, like, you can come to me with anything, it's okay. And I think that is much more important than judging our kids, telling them what's right or wrong. I'll give you an example on the parenting aspect. In schools, the big thing is sexting and sexting naked pictures of kids.
Right.
It's a problem. And a lot of parents tell their children that is wrong. And I didn't take that approach. The approach I took with my children was, this is your body, this is your choice. You can do what you want, but you have to realize a few things if you choose to make that decision.
Live with the consequences, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going just to the person you sense to. Right. It's going to go everywhere. And if you have doubts, I want you to ask yourself this one question. If you're going to take a picture of your body, ask yourself this question. Are you okay with grandma seeing it? And if the answer is yes, it's probably okay. Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, you may want to rethink about that.
Right, because the whole world at some point may be seeing images of your body. And sadly, we've had kids commit suicide over these things, and it's a terrible road to go on. But that's the open dialogue you should have with your kids. Unfortunately, most parents aren't like you, and well, not most, but there's a number.
Tell them it's wrong, don't do it.
One other point on this, too, Jim, because I find this interesting, is, the debate over leave your hands off my church and Obama and all these things. We talk about gay marriage and all these things and the outrage that's going on there. Abstinence-only programs, as you said, $75 million diverted from federal tax dollars to these programs. The people that are teaching this, are they fundamentalist Christians? I mean, who's out there in the classrooms doing this work?
This is even more disturbing because it's not our teachers the majority of the time. It is a church. It is a fundamentalist church coming in to teach it. They created a separate organization called like the New Hope Center, which is, and they have even like on Christian volunteer pages saying, hey, come volunteer for our programs. So you have uneducated people, parents that are fundamentalists coming in to teach our kids sex education that know nothing about it except for, my religion tells me not to do this, therefore you should.
Well, where's the cry about separation of church and state there? Am I missing something?
No, there definitely is. There's definitely a church-state separation issue here. But I think more productively, even Christian parents that want their kids to be abstinent are horrified when they read like the things when they find out what's actually being taught of misinformation.
Yeah, and that's more dangerous than just saying don't do it.
Right, and that's where we're, instead of just having an atheist come up here and say, hey, this is separation of church and state and everybody ignore me, that's not the issue. The issue is this is harmful, and even Christian parents, anybody will agree that the things I read are horrible and that they shouldn't be in there, and that's why you're not seeing this as a separation church-state issue, more of an educational issue.
Jim Helton with Tri-State Free Thinkers, and again, trying to get this whole abstinence-only education out of Kentucky schools. Anyway, Jim, thanks again for the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, be well. There you go. He brings up a lot of interesting points there. What are your views on this? I mean, me personally, as I said, I want my kids armed with all the information. I understand why they teach this in public schools because, parents don't like having this conversation. If we complain about all the social ills of babies having babies, and look at, we had 2 shootings again last night, how can you not be for all-inclusive sex education? I don't see a world which we can have fewer unwanted pregnancies, fewer abortions, and at the same time teach abstinence only. Those two don't jive.